The sun burned bright and cruel over the endless desert. The air shimmered, the ground cracked, and the wind carried dust that stung the eyes. Lyra walked slowly, her feet dragging, her injured leg making every step painful. Her people were ahead of her, their tall shapes moving in a line, their cloaks whipping in the dry wind. They didn't look back. Not even once. She tried to keep up, but her body was weak. Her breath short, her heart heavy. "Please, wait," she called, her voice breaking in the heat. No one answered. Her tribe had made their decision that morning. They gathered before sunrise, speaking in low voices while she sat in the corner of the camp, knowing what was coming. Those who could not hunt, fight, or work were called burdens. Burdens were left behind, and today she was the burden. Lyra's mind replayed the moment her brother refused to meet her eyes. Her mother turned away, hiding her face under her hood. The leader's voice had been cold. "You slow us down, Lyra. The storms are coming. We cannot carry you." And that was it. No trial, no plea, no second chance. They had walked away, leaving her with nothing but the thin clothes on her back and a small water pouch that was already half empty. Now the desert stretched endlessly around her. The sky was too bright, her eyes hurt, her mouth was dry, and her skin felt like it was on fire. Every time she stepped, her leg sent a sharp pain up to her hip. She wanted to scream, but there was no one to hear her. No one cared. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. She couldn't tell. Her vision blurred, the world around her twisting in the heat. The wind picked up, grains of sand biting at her skin. The sound of the storm was low at first, like distant thunder, but it grew and grew, until it roared in her ears. Lyra knew she wouldn't survive a desert storm. The wind could rip a person apart, the sand could bury them alive. She looked around desperately for shelter, but there was nothing. No rocks, no caves, just endless flat ground. She fell to her knees, her hands shaking as she tried to stand again. Her pouch slipped from her belt, spilling the last drops of water into the sand. Gone, just like her people as she knelt there, ready to give up. A strange sound reached her ears. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the storm. It was a low hum, steady, mechanical. She looked up. Squinting against the blinding light, something moved above her. A shadow in the sun. It grew larger, blocking the heat, a shape she didn't recognize. The hum turned into a soft landing thud, and the air shifted. The object was smooth, metallic, with strange markings and lights that blinked softly. A hatch opened on its side, and a figure stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing armor that reflected the sun. A helmet covered his face. But she could tell by the shape, this was no one from her tribe. No, this was something she had only heard about in whispers. A human. Her people told stories about humans, that they were dangerous, selfish, unpredictable, that they only helped if they had something to gain. Her heart pounded, her body tensed. But she was too weak to run. The human stepped closer, his boots crunching in the sand. When he reached her, he crouched down, his helmet shifting as if he was studying her face. He reached to his side and pulled out a small container, holding it out to her. She stared at it, not moving. Was it poisoned? A trap, a way to make her trust him before he killed her. Her people's warnings echoed in her mind, but her lips were cracked, her throat burned, and her body screamed for water. Her fingers trembled as she took it. The liquid was cool, pure, and it felt like life itself. She drank until it was gone. Gasping for air as she lowered the container, the human said nothing, only stood and looked toward the storm. The clouds of sand were moving fast, the sky darkening. He pressed something on his wrist, and the hatch of his ship opened wider. Then, without asking, he lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Lyra's body stiffened in shock. The last thing She saw before the ship's door closed was the wall of sand rushing toward them, and for the first time in hours, she wondered, why would a human save her? The ship's door sealed shut just as the storm slammed against the hull. The sound was like thousands of fists pounding at once. The wind howled and the ship shook under the force. Lyra sat on a narrow bench, her eyes wide, her heart still racing. She had never been inside a human ship before. The walls were smooth, lined with strange panels that glowed softly. The air was cool, clean, and smelled faintly of metal and something. Sharp, she could hear the hum of hidden machines, steady and calm. The human removed his helmet. And for the first time, she saw his face. His skin was pale compared to hers, his hair short and dark. His eyes sharp yet calm. He didn't smile. But there was no anger or cruelty in his gaze. He placed a small box on the bench beside her. Opening it to reveal cloth, metal tools, and clear gel inside a tube. "You're hurt," he said simply. His voice steady. Lyra tensed, pulling her leg away. "I can fix it," he added, kneeling down. Her mind screamed to refuse. Her people had told her humans were unpredictable, but her leg burned with pain. She didn't move as he gently lifted it. The gel was cool as he applied it to her wound. The pain fading almost instantly, she gasped, staring at the injury that was already beginning to close. "What is that?" she whispered. "Human medicine," he replied. "It works fast." She didn't understand. Why was he helping her? What did he want in return? The ship shook harder, and a deep growl echoed from somewhere outside. It wasn't the storm. Lyra's head turned toward the sound, her instincts screaming of danger. The human stood, moving toward the front of the ship through the small viewing window. Lyra saw shapes moving in the swirling sand, long bodies, thick arm-alike. Plates, glowing eyes that pierced through the storm. "Predators," she whispered, without thinking. The human's hand moved to his belt, pulling out a weapon unlike anything she had seen before. It was sleek, black, with glowing blue lines along its side. "If they get inside," he said, glancing back at her, "you hide, no matter what happens." The sound of claws scraping against the hull sent chills down her spine. Something heavy slammed into the ship, the walls groaning under the impact. The human moved fast, pressing controls on the wall. Locking the doors tighter, the lights inside flickered as another strike hit the side. Lyra's breathing quickened. She had seen these predators tear apart hunters from her tribe. They didn't stop until their prey was dead. The first impact on the door made her flinch. The second made her grip the edge of the bench until her fingers hurt. Through the window, she saw one of the creatures leap onto the ship's roof, its claws screeching against the metal. The human raised his weapon and aimed a loud burst of blue energy shooting out. The creature howled, falling from sight. Another slammed into the side, denting the metal. "Stay down," the human ordered, stepping toward the hatch. Lyra couldn't understand him. Why was he risking himself for her? He didn't know her. She was nothing to him. Her people had left her without a second thought. Yet this stranger, this human, was standing between her and death. The sounds outside grew louder. More claws, more growls. The storm screamed around them. The ship rocked again. Lyra's instincts told her to hide, but her eyes stayed locked on him. He moved with a purpose, calm, but ready. Like he had done this many times before, he pressed something on his wrist, and the ship's underside released a shockwave, the floor vibrating under her feet. The predator's cries echoed faintly before fading into the storm. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. The human lowered his weapon, glancing toward the window to be sure the danger was gone. When he turned back, their eyes met. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Safe. The word felt strange to her. Her people had never made her feel safe. And yet here, in the presence of a human she barely knew. She felt something she couldn't explain. The storm still raged outside, but inside the ship. Lyra sat in silence, her heart slowly calmed. Her eyes still fixed on the man who had just fought for her. She didn't know what this human wanted or why he had saved her. But one thought kept echoing in her mind. Maybe her people were wrong about humans. The storm outside had not weakened. If anything, it had grown wilder. Screaming like 1,000 angry spirits, the human Jack, as Lyra had heard him call himself when speaking into his wrist device, was standing near the control panel. His weapon still in hand, Lyra sat where he had told her to stay, her eyes darting to the window. The shifting walls of sand made it almost impossible to see. But shapes moved within it, dark, fast, and hungry. She had seen desert predators before, but never in numbers like this. Her people feared them more than the storms themselves. These creatures hunted in packs, their bodies low to the ground. Armored hides gleaming faintly in flashes of lightning from the storm above. Each had eyes like burning coals, their glow slicing through the darkness. The ship shuddered again as something slammed into its side. The noise so loud, Lyra flinched. The human didn't even blink, only adjusted his grip on the weapon. "They're testing the hull," he said in his calm voice, looking for a way in. Lyra swallowed hard. "If they find one, we'll die." Jack glanced at her. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Another crash, this time on the roof. Metal groaned, claws screeched, and the ship tilted slightly under the weight of whatever had landed on top. Jack moved to a small hatch in the floor and pulled out a case. Inside were round metal devices that pulsed with a dim blue light. He tossed one to the wall, and it stuck there with a magnetic snap. "What is that?" Lyra asked, her voice shaking. "Stun charge," he replied. "Non-lethal, but it'll make them wish they'd stayed." Home, the first predator dropped from the roof. Landing just outside the viewing window, it was massive, bigger than 2 men. With long jaws lined with teeth that glistened like knives. It saw her, and its lips curled back into something that almost looked like a grin. Lyra's breath caught. Jack didn't hesitate. His weapon fired, a burst of blue energy slamming into the creature's chest, sending it tumbling into the sandstorm. But the victory was short-lived. 3 more shapes emerged from the storm. Circling, their eyes fixed on the ship, they moved like shadows. Silent, except for the low growl that vibrated through the air. Jack fired again. But one creature dodged and leaped, crashing into the side with enough force to dent the metal. The ship rocked. Throwing Lyra against the wall, pain shot through her leg, but she pushed herself back up, clutching the bench for balance. "Stay low," Jack ordered, stepping forward as the creatures attacked from different sides. The stun charges began to hum, a sharp electric sound filling the cabin. Outside, arcs of blue light flared, and the predators yelped in pain, retreating for a moment, but they didn't leave. Lyra knew their nature. They were patient, willing to wait for the perfect opening. The storm was their ally, hiding their movements. The moment the charges stopped, they would attack again. A sudden impact shook the back of the ship, followed by a loud tearing sound. Lyra's eyes widened. "They're breaking through." Jack spun, moving toward the noise, his weapon ready before he could reach it. A section of the wall burst inward, sand and wind pouring through the gap. One of the predators lunged in, jaws snapping, its roar deafening in the small space. Lyra froze, the sight burning into her mind. The creature's head turned toward her, its glowing eyes locking on like she was the only thing in the world. Jack stepped between them without hesitation, firing point blank. The blast threw the predator back into the storm. Jack slammed his hand on a control, and a metal shield dropped over the breach. Sealing it shut, Lyra's chest rose and fell quickly, her breath ragged. Her people had left her to die without a fight. This human had just faced death twice in the last few minutes. All to protect her. Why? She whispered without thinking. Why would you do that for me? Jack didn't answer right away. He only checked his weapon, reloaded it, and kept his eyes on the sensors. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. Because no one should be left to die alone. The storm still raged, and the predators were still out there. Lyra didn't know if they would survive the night. But for the first time in her life, she felt that maybe she wasn't completely worthless after all. The storm had passed by morning. The silence felt strange after so many hours of howling wind and pounding sand. Outside, the desert lay covered in smooth waves of dust, like nothing had happened. But inside the ship, Lyra sat on the bench, her legs stretched out, while Jack carefully worked on it again. His touch was gentle, but sure. He cleaned the wound. With a clear liquid that stung at first, then soothed, she watched him work, unsure why she felt safer here than she ever had among her own people. When her tribe treated wounds, it was quick and rough, as if the injured person had already lost their value. Jack's eyes focused, his movements slow and careful, as though her injury truly mattered to him. "You'll be able to walk better soon," he said quietly. Securing a small, flexible brace around her leg, Lyra looked at him, still wary. "Why? Are you helping me?" "He didn't stop working because you need help." Her brow furrowed. "And what do you want in return?" Jack glanced up, his expression unreadable. Nothing. The word unsettled her. In her world, nothing was. Ever free, every action had a price. Yet here was a human, a stranger, who had risked his life and given her water, shelter, and medicine without demanding anything. She leaned back, unsure what to say. For a while, the only sound was the hum of the ship's systems. Then Jack spoke again. "You said your people left you because you couldn't keep up." Lyra's chest tightened. "Yes, I was slowing them down," they said. "It was better this way." Jack shook his head slowly. "Better for them, maybe not for you." Something in his tone made her ask, "Do humans leave their weak behind?" Jack's gaze hardened. "No, we take care of our own, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Lyra didn't understand it fully in her tribe. Strength was the only value that mattered. Those who couldn't hunt, fight, or work were left behind without regret. It was the way things had always been. But now she wondered if it had always been wrong. Her eyes wandered to the control screen at the front of the ship. Bright dots moved slowly across it. "Where are we going?" she asked. Jack adjusted the controls. "I was going to take you to the nearest settlement, but if your people are there, that's not an option." Lyra's stomach twisted. "If they see me, they'll kill me for surviving." Jack glanced at her with a small nod. "Then we'll find somewhere else. Somewhere else." The words felt heavy in her mind. She had never imagined living anywhere except with her tribe, yet now that they had cast her out, the thought of returning to them felt like walking into a death sentence. Still, she hesitated. "Why would you care where I go?" Jack didn't answer right away. Instead, he checked a small display on his wrist. Finally, he said, "Because you're not a burden to me, Lyra." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her before. She didn't reply, afraid her voice would break. Instead, she let the silence stretch, the weight of his words settling deep inside her. The ship hummed steadily as they crossed the desert sky. Lyra's eyes wandered to a small box on the wall near the bench. She tilted her head. "What is that?" Jack followed her gaze, then pressed a button. Music filled the cabin, soft, warm, unlike anything she had ever heard. Her eyes widened. "It's beautiful." Jack smiled faintly. "It's a human thing. Music makes the world feel less empty." She closed her eyes, letting the sound wrap around her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was waiting for the next pain or the next loss. The feeling scared her, but she didn't want it to end. Then the calm was broken by a sharp beeping from the control panel. Jack leaned forward, frowning, distress signal. Another ship nearby. Lyra's eyes snapped open. Could be raiders. They use fake signals to lure ships in. Jack's hand hovered over the controls, his expression torn between caution and duty. Could also be someone who needs help, he said. The way he said it told her what his decision would be. Lyra felt her chest tighten. If it's a trap, we won't survive. Jack met her gaze. If it's not, and we ignore it, someone dies. The hum of the engines deepened as he changed course toward the signal. Lyra gripped the edge of the bench, her heart beating faster. In her tribe, they would never risk themselves for strangers. Yet this human was heading straight toward possible danger without hesitation, and she didn't know whether to call him brave or foolish. The ship's engines hummed louder as Jack pushed the throttle forward. Lyra sat tense on the bench, her hands gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Through the front viewing screen, the endless desert gave way to jagged cliffs, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across the sand. The distress signal grew stronger, each beep sharper and faster. Jack's eyes stayed fixed ahead, scanning for movement. Lyra kept glancing between the screen and the desert below. She had warned him raiders often use fake distress calls to lure ships in. They would make it look like a crash, hide in the rocks, then strike when help arrived. Her tribe had lost several hunters to those traps. But Jack didn't slow down. Finally, the wreck came into view. It was a small cargo vessel, its hull torn open, smoke curling from the gash. The ground around it was scorched, the sand blackened as if lightning had struck again and again. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "To clean?" she muttered. "What?" Jack asked without looking at her. "The damage? It's too clean. Raiders make a mess when they attack. This looks staged." Jack's jaw tightened. Still, he brought the ship lower. Keeping a steady altitude, the cargo vessel looked empty. No movement, no sound but the wind. Then, faintly, a voice crackled over the comms. "Help. Anyone, please." Lyra's heart thudded. It sounded weak, desperate, almost real enough to believe. But something about it made her uneasy. She leaned closer to Jack. "That voice doesn't break. It doesn't fade. It's too perfect. It's a recording, before." Jack could respond. Movement flickered in the corner of the screen. Figures emerging from behind the rocks. Their armor, patchwork, and rusted. Weapons crude but deadly. Raiders, Lyra hissed. Jack's hands flew over the controls, pulling the ship upward. But it was too late. Two grappling hooks shot from the cliffs. Attaching to the hull with magnetic clamps, the ship jerked violently. Alarms blaring, Lyra fell forward, grabbing the bench to keep from hitting the floor. Jack cursed under his breath. Slamming a switch that made the ship shudder, trying to break free, the raiders began climbing the cables toward them. Their faces hidden behind masks painted with jagged teeth. Jack grabbed his weapon and tossed another to Lyra. She stared at it like it was a live snake. "I don't know how to use this." "Point and press," Jack said quickly. "Don't overthink it." The first raider reached the side hatch, pounding on it with a heavy tool. The sound echoed through the cabin. Jack moved toward the hatch, weapon ready, while Lyra stayed. Back, her hands shaking, another raider climbed up the opposite side, slamming something against the hull. Breaching charge. "Get down," Jack shouted, pulling Lyra behind cover. The blast shook the ship, metal tearing. And the raider stepped through the smoke. Weapon raised, Jack fired instantly. The blue burst, slamming into the raider's chest and sending him crashing back into the sand. Another climbed in behind him, this one swinging a blade. Lyra's instincts screamed, and she pulled the trigger on the weapon Jack had given her. The shot hit the raider's shoulder, spinning him around before he collapsed. She stared at the weapon in her hands, shocked. Jack gave her no time to think. More coming. Stay sharp. The next minutes blurred into chaos flashes of light. Shouts, the smell of scorched metal. Lyra fired again and again, each time shaking but hitting her target. Jack moved like he had done this 100 times, ducking, firing, striking when the raiders got too close. Finally, the last raider on. The cables slipped and fell back to the desert floor, disappearing into the dust. Silence returned, broken only by the alarm still beeping in the background. Jack leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Lyra's hands were trembling, but she didn't drop the weapon. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her mind racing. "You saved us," Jack said. Glancing at her, she shook her head. "You saved me." First, they shared a brief look, one that said more than words could. Jack returned to the controls, breaking the magnetic clamps free. The ship rose higher, leaving the fake distress signal and the scattered raiders far behind. Lyra sank back into the bench, her heart still pounding. She had fought for her life alongside a human, and somehow, it felt right. For the first time since being cast out, she wasn't just surviving. She was moving toward something, maybe a place, maybe a future, and though she didn't know where this journey would end, she knew one thing: she wasn't alone anymore. The ship cut through the sky, leaving the wreck and the raiders far behind. Lyra sat on the bench, clutching the weapon Jack had given her, her hands still trembling. Her ears rang from the fight, her chest tight from the rush of fear and adrenaline. Jack was at the controls, scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. "Looks like we're clear," he said finally, his voice steady but low. Lyra's shoulders eased a little, but something inside her didn't feel right. The fight had ended too quickly. Raiders didn't give up so easily. She opened her mouth to warn Jack when a sharp beep echoed from the console. Jack frowned. Incoming signal. No ID. Before he could react, the ship jolted hard, a deep metallic thud shaking the floor beneath them. "What was that?" Lyra asked, her voice tight. Jack's hands moved over the controls. "Grapple hook. We've been locked onto." The ship lurched again as another hit. This time, the force dragged them sideways, pulling them toward a cluster of jagged cliffs. Lyra's heart pounded. "It's them. They followed us." Jack tried to break free, but the ship's engines strained, warning lights flashing. "They've got a bigger ship," he muttered, "and they're reeling us in." The cliffs grew closer, shadows swallowing the sunlight as they were pulled toward a hidden docking bay carved into the rock. Within seconds, their ship was forced down onto a landing pad with a loud clang. The sound of heavy boots echoed outside, growing louder. Jack grabbed his weapon and tossed Lyra hers. "Stay behind me," he said, moving toward the hatch. But before they could prepare, the ship's door hissed open, not because Jack had unlocked it, but because someone had overridden the controls. 4 armed raiders stepped inside, weapons raised, masks painted with the same jagged teeth as before. "Drop it, human," one of them snarled through his mask. Jack didn't move, his eyes flicking. "To Lyra now?" the raider barked, pressing the muzzle of his weapon against Jack's chest. Lyra's hands tightened on her weapon, but Jack gave the smallest shake of his head. Slowly, he lowered his gun to the floor, kicking it toward them. The raiders moved in fast, one yanking the weapon from Lyra's hands, another grabbing her arm roughly. She struggled, but the raider's grip was like steel. Jack lunged toward her, but a sharp blow to the back of his head sent him to his knees. 2 raiders pinned his arms, forcing him down. They were dragged out of the ship and into the docking bay. The air smelled of oil and rust, dim lights casting long shadows. Several other ships were docked here, some broken beyond repair, others ready to fly. Raiders moved about like vultures picking through scraps. They were shoved into a small metal cage at the far end of the bay. the door slamming shut with a hollow clang. Lyra pressed herself against the bars, glaring at their captors. "What do you want?" she demanded. One of the raiders laughed. "You alien girl are worth nothing," he pointed at Jack. "But humans fetch a high price in certain markets." Lyra's stomach twisted. They weren't after her. Jack was the prize. Jack sat against the back wall of the cage, his head bleeding where they had hit him. "You okay?" she whispered. He nodded. "Slightly. I've been worse." But Lyra could see the tension in his jaw. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was thinking about how to get them out. Hours passed, the raiders moving in and out. The leader finally approached, a tall figure with a blackened mask and armor made of scavenged metal plates. He crouched in front of the cage, tilting his head. "You fought well earlier," he said to Jack, "but now you belong to me." Jack didn't answer, his eyes locked on the raiders. The leader's gaze shifted to Lyra. "And you, little burden, will watch him be sold. Just like your people would have watched you die." The words cut deep. Lyra's breath caught, her anger boiling. But before she could speak, Jack's hand brushed hers, a silent message wait when the raiders left. Jack leaned close, his voice low. "They didn't search me completely," he murmured, from under his sleeve. He pulled a thin piece of metal, bent at one end. Lyra's eyes widened. A lockpick. Jack gave a faint smile. "Takes time, though. We'll need a distraction." She glanced at the guards on the far side of the bay. Their attention on a game of dice. Her mind raced. A distraction she could do, because if they stayed here, Jack would be sold, and she would be alone again. And she wasn't going to let that happen. The air in the docking bay was thick with the smell of oil, sweat, and metal. The hum of distant machinery mixed with the low laughter of the guards. Lyra's eyes stayed locked on them, memorizing their patterns. Two stood near the exit. Another sat against a wall, half asleep, while the rest played their game. She leaned closer to Jack, her voice barely a whisper. "I can give you your distraction." Jack's hands worked quietly at the lock, the thin piece of metal twisting between his fingers. "What's your plan?" he asked, without looking up. Her lips curled into a small, determined smile. The loud kind. She moved toward the front of the cage and slammed her hands against the bars. Her voice sharp. "You think you're strong, hiding behind masks. Come here and face me." The guards glanced at her, confused. One laughed. "The alien wants a fight. I want to see if raiders are as tough as they pretend." She spat back. Her tone was so filled with venom that two of them actually stepped closer, curiosity winning over caution as they neared. Lyra gripped the bars and pulled herself forward. When the closest guard leaned in to mock her, she spit in his face. He cursed loudly, stumbling back. The others roared with laughter, but the noise was enough. Every eye turned toward the scene. Jack's hands moved faster behind her. The faint click of the lock opening drowned out by the noise. He slid the cage door open silently, stepping out without a sound. Lyra kept their attention on her. "What's the matter? Scared of a burden like me?" Before they realized what was happening, Jack was behind the nearest guard. Striking hard with the butt of a stolen weapon, the man collapsed instantly. The others spun around, reaching for their guns, but Lyra lunged forward, grabbing one guard's arm through the bars and yanking him off balance. Jack fired. The blue burst, sending another raider sprawling. Chaos erupted in the bay, shouts echoing against the walls. Jack grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her out of the cage. "Run," he barked. They sprinted toward their ship. Weaving between crates and fuel tanks, blaster fire hissed past them, hitting metal and spraying sparks. Lyra's legs burned, her injury screaming. But she didn't slow. The ship loomed ahead, its hatch still open. They dove inside. Jack slamming the controls to close the door just as two raiders reached it. The hatch sealed with a thud. and Jack ran to the cockpit. "Hold on," he said. Gripping the controls, the engines roared to life, the ship lifting off the pad. Raiders scattered below, some firing wildly, others scrambling to their own ships. As they shot out of the docking bay and into open sky, Lyra collapsed into the co-pilot seat, her chest heaving. She glanced at Jack. We made it. He didn't take his eyes off the horizon. Not yet. We need to lose them. They sped across the desert, diving between cliffs and skimming low over ridges. Jack's hands moved with precision, every turn and drop shaking the ship, but keeping them just ahead of their pursuers. Finally, after what felt like forever, the radar screen went clear. Jack eased back the throttle, his shoulders finally relaxing. "They're gone," he said quietly. Lyra sat back, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jack glanced at her. "You did good back there." She smiled faintly. "I wasn't going to let them take you." Hours later, they reached a small human colony on the edge of the desert. It was nothing like the cold, harsh camps of her people. Children ran through the dusty streets laughing. Traders called out from stalls. And no one looked at her with suspicion or disgust. Jack led her through the settlement, introducing her to people with warm smiles. "She's with me," he said simply, and that was enough for them to welcome her. A woman offered them food. Another handed Lyra a blanket without asking for anything in return. It felt strange. This kindness, dangerous even because once you felt it, you couldn't forget it. That night, they sat outside the small home Jack had been given by the colony. The stars stretched endlessly above, brighter than she had ever seen. Lyra looked at him, her voice quiet. "I don't know why you saved me." Jack leaned back. "Because you deserved to be saved." She swallowed hard, and now, he smiled faintly. "Now you're not a burden, Lyra, you're family." Her chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from fear. She nodded, her eyes glistening. For the first time since being cast out, she felt something she had never known before. She belonged.